Welcome to this explainer. I'm so glad you're joining us today because honestly, we're looking at something that is just mind-blowing. We're diving into the fascinating reality of how our daily diet literally controls our brain chemistry, our moods, and ultimately the overall satisfaction we get out of life. We're not just talking about general wellness here. We're talking about the exact microscopic chemical recipe that dictates how you experience the world every single day. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to imagine a kind of bizarre scenario for a second. What if you took your brain and completely dehydrated it, like you sucked every single drop of moisture right out of it? We're strictly talking hypothetically here, of course, but if you broke what was left down to its core nutritional content, what exactly would you be holding? Well, the breakdown is surprisingly specific. The vast majority of the weight in that dehydrated brain, it's actually made up of fats or lipids. Right behind that massive chunk of fat, we've got proteins and amino acids. And then, rounding out the rest of the mix, there are trace amounts of micronutrients and glucose. Now, obviously, the brain is way more than just the sum of its nutritional parts. But here's the thing. Each one of these components has a very real, distinct chemical impact on how you function, how you develop, your mood, and your energy levels. So, let's look at that biggest piece of the puzzle first, the fats. Since lipids make up the bulk of the matter, they're essentially the fundamental building blocks of the brain's physical structure. It's like the foundation of a house. The types of fat you consume literally dictate the physical development and structural integrity of this totally vital organ. But, and this is absolutely crucial, not all fats are created equal. On one hand, we've got the absolute superstars, essential omegas, specifically omegas 3 and 6. We literally have to get these from our diets, from stuff like nuts, seeds, and fatty fish. These omegas are vital for creating and maintaining cell membranes, and they've actually been directly linked to preventing degenerative brain conditions. But then, you have to contrast those with the detrimental fats, the bad guys. We're talking about trans and saturated fats. While omegas build your brain up, eating these bad fats over the long term can actively compromise your brain health. It's a night and day difference. All right, moving on to the next major component of our brain makeup, proteins and amino acids. If fats are these structural walls of your brain, you can think of proteins and amino acids as the construction workers inside. They're the vital building blocks of growth that actively manipulate how we feel and how we behave, day in and day out. So why do they have so much control over us? It's because amino acids contain the precursors to neurotransmitters. Those are the chemical messengers carrying vital signals back and forth between your neurons. And just look at what those signals affect. We're talking about your mood, your sleep quality, your attentiveness, and even your weight. These aren't just abstract ideas. These chemical messengers are literally dictating your daily human experience. But here is where it gets super competitive and, honestly, a bit frantic. Getting access to your brain cells is a really tricky process. Amino acids actively have to fight and compete for limited access. Because of this intense competition, eating a varied diet it's absolutely essential. You need complex combinations of compounds from all sorts of foods to stimulate your brain cells properly. When they are stimulated, they release those famous mood-altering chemicals you've probably heard of: norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. Without a balanced diet, your brain messengers get totally out of whack, and your mood can quickly spiral entirely in one direction or another. Think about it. Have you ever felt that intense, sluggish, I just want to nap apathy right after eating a massive plate of pasta for lunch? Or maybe you felt a sudden sharp spike in alertness late at night after a snack. That's no coincidence. That is the literal chemical effect of food taking a hold of your brain in real time. It's exactly why a heavy carb load leaves you wanting to crawl under your desk, while a nice protein-rich meal leaves you feeling sharp and ready to absolutely crush the afternoon. Now, what's really interesting about this process is how the smaller trace elements step in as your brain's elite defense force. Just like the rest of your body, the brain needs a steady supply of micronutrients to survive and thrive. You've got antioxidants from fruits and veggies fighting off the free radicals that want to destroy your brain cells. This lets your brain work powerfully for way longer. Then you've got your powerful vitamins like B6, B12, and folic acid. Without those, our brains become highly susceptible to mental decline and disease. And don't forget trace minerals like iron, copper, and zinc. Those are strictly fundamental to our early cognitive development. To synthesize all those amazing building blocks and elite defense mechanisms, your brain requires an immense amount of power. In fact, here's a totally staggering statistic for you. The human brain only makes up about 2% of our total body weight. Just 2%. And yet, it's incredibly greedy. It demands a massive 20% of your body's entire energy resources. Talk about punching above its weight class. So where exactly does that 20% of energy come from? It comes directly from carbohydrates that our bodies digest into glucose, which is essentially blood sugar. Glucose is the primary fuel for your brain. And your frontal lobes? They are so incredibly sensitive to any drop in glucose that a sudden dip in mental function is actually one of the very first signals of nutrient deficiency. That is exactly why you get hangry or experience that awful brain fog when you skip a meal. Your brain is literally crying out for fuel. But assuming we are getting glucose regularly, we really have to look at the source. Carbs come in three main forms: starch, sugar, and fiber. The funny thing is, on most standard nutrition labels, these are just lazily lumped together into one total carbs number. But the exact ratio of these three specific subgroups, that completely dictates how your brain and your body are going to respond to that food. Let me give you an example. A high glycemic food, like a slice of white bread, causes a rapid, massive release of glucose. Your blood is instantly flooded. But then comes the crash. Your blood sugar just plummets, and your attention span drops right into the basement along with it. But if you opt for something like oats or legumes, you experience a much slower, controlled release. This steady pacing enables a beautifully sustained, reliable level of attentiveness and brain power over hours. It's a total game changer. Let's move to and see how this builds from the microscopic chemistry inside your brain to the macro level of your entire life. Because at the end of the day, these tiny cellular choices dictate your overall lifestyle, and your lifestyle absolutely dictates your happiness. The hard truth is, if you want to be happy, you really have to look after yourself. Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, wants to live a life filled with worries, anxiety, and poor health. No matter what your passions are, what you're into, you are simply going to enjoy your life so much more when you're physically and mentally thriving, rather than constantly battling the negative mental impacts of a bad diet. Now, let's be real, everyone likes an occasional treat. The odd burger or a handful of chips isn't going to derail your life. But if you're stuffing yourself with crisps, chocolate, fizzy drinks, and fried foods every single day, you are actively inviting some pretty severe physical outcomes. Daily indulgences like this are undeniably associated with obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and infertility. These are some of life's most difficult hurdles, and they're heavily, heavily linked to our everyday choices. So how do we avoid these outcomes? It really comes down to energy balance. This means adopting a lifestyle that requires you to use just as much energy as you take in. You simply cannot sit in a chair all day and expect your brain or your body to be at its best. You've got to balance the scales. Keep your fat and sugar intake down, push your fiber, protein, and vitamins up, and pair all of that with active physical energy expenditure. So the crucial point is this, to quote the source material directly: when it comes to what you bite, chew, and swallow, your choices have a direct and long-lasting effect on the most powerful organ in your body. I just love that. Every single bite is a structural decision. Every meal is a direct chemical command that you are giving to your brain. Which brings us to the most important question of all. Knowing everything we just went over today, knowing how fats build your brain structure, how amino acids dictate your mood, and how glucose fuels your focus, what will you fuel your most powerful organ with tomorrow? Because the power to optimize your brain is quite literally sitting right there on your plate. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this empowers you to make your next meal a great one.